In March 1977, two friends, Andrew and Attila, set off for an adventure they had been planning for weeks. The destination was Real Well, a well-known cave in Tennessee. Its most famous feature was the entrance, a deep 160-foot, 50-meter pit that descended into the darkness below. The cave was known for its beauty, but also its challenges. The entrance, often slippery and dangerous, required precise planning and skill to navigate. This is the tragic story of the Real Well Cave. Andrew, 32, was an experienced caver who had spent years honing his skills in caves across the region. Attila, 26, was still relatively new to the sport. He had only explored 5 caves before, but was eager to prove himself. Attila's enthusiasm was contagious, and Andrew, confident in his abilities, was happy to guide his friend. Both believed they were prepared for whatever the cave might throw at them. They weren't. The morning of March 18th was overcast and dreary. Clouds loomed heavy in the sky, and a steady drizzle soaked the ground. As they drove toward the cave's entrance, the sound of water became unmistakable, a constant roar that grew louder with every step. When they finally reached the opening, the sight and sound of the waterfall pouring into the pit were overwhelming. The rain from the previous days had swelled the flow to levels neither of them had anticipated. Andrew paused, considering their options. Attila, standing by their gear, looked eager and ready to begin. In the car, they had wetsuits that could protect them from the freezing water, but both decided they wouldn't need them. It was a fateful decision, one that would haunt Andrew forever. Despite the loud waterfall, their excitement won out over the caution. They set up their ropes, positioning them directly under the rushing water. They knew they would get wet, but underestimated just how cold and powerful the water would be. Attila, so focused on starting the adventure, had also forgotten to bring his helmet. Andrew noticed, but didn't insist he retrieve it. Another mistake in what would become a series of critical errors. Andrew volunteered to descend first. Clipping onto the rope, he leaned back over the edge and began his slow journey down into the cave. The moment he entered the waterfall's path, icy water crouched down on him, drenching him completely. It was far worse than he had imagined. His clothing offered little protection, and the cold seeped into his body almost immediately. By the time he reached the bottom, he was shaking uncontrollably. Attila followed shortly after. He grabbed the rope and began his descent, but the water seemed even more intense now. The pressure from the falling water made it hard to grip the rope, and the icy temperature stole his breath. When he finally reached the bottom, he was already trembling. Inside the cave, the beauty of the environment was undeniable. The walls glistened with moisture, reflecting the dim beams from their headlamps. The air was heavy and damp, and the roar of the waterfall echoed around them. For a brief moment, they marveled at the stunning formations, stalactites, and shimmering pools. But the cold was relentless. Within 30 minutes, Attila began to show signs of serious discomfort. His teeth chattered loudly, and his hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his flashlight. "Andrew," he said through clenched teeth, "I can't stay here. I'm too cold." Andrew, who was also struggling with the frigid temperature, added, "All right, let's get you out of here," he said, trying to sound reassuring. He didn't want to alarm Attila, but he could see the younger man was in trouble. They moved back toward the rope. The waterfall, louder and fiercer than ever, poured down in an unbroken stream. Andrew went to help Attila rig his climbing gear, but Attila, shivering uncontrollably, rushed to do it himself. His setup was far from ideal. He used a seat harness and a chest harness he had tied himself, along with the Petzl Ascender and a shunt as a backup device. But the Ascender was attached to his harness with a cow's tail sling that was far too long, and he had connected it with 6 non-locking carabiners. It was a dangerous improvisation that would soon prove disastrous. Andrew noticed the unsafe setup but hesitated to intervene. He was cold, tired, and assumed they could fix it once they were out of the worst conditions. Before he could say anything, Attila had already started climbing. The ascent was grueling. The water pounded down on Attila as he struggled to pull himself up the slippery rope. His backup shunt kept slipping, providing little stability. His hands were numb from the cold, making it harder to grip the rope or adjust his equipment. Halfway up, he came to a stop. "Andrew, I can't move," he yelled, his voice barely audible over the roar of the waterfall. "Come back down if you need to," Andrew shouted back, but Attila didn't respond. He was exhausted, and the cold had drained all of his strength. Suddenly, one of the non-locking carabiners failed, leaving him hanging by the cow's tail. The long sling left him hanging helplessly, far from his ascender. Andrew's heart sank as he realized Attila was trapped. Without wasting a moment, he climbed onto the rope and began climbing toward his friend. The icy water battered him as he ascended, making every move agonizingly slow. By the time he reached Attila, he was barely able to feel his hands. Attila hung limp in his harness, his body unresponsive. He was still alive, but hypothermia had taken hold. His skin was pale, and he shivered weakly. Andrew knew he had to act fast. He attempted a rescue maneuver called a pick-off, where a rescuer attaches the stranded climber to their own harness and descends with them. But the freezing water and his own numbing hands made it nearly impossible to secure Attila. Every attempt failed. Desperate, Andrew tried to climb higher, hoping to pull them both to safety, but Attila's weight was too much. After only 15 feet, Andrew's strength gave out. Exhausted and defeated, Andrew swung himself toward a nearby ledge and managed to pull himself onto it. He unclipped from the rope and crawled to a drier spot where he collapsed, unconscious from the cold. Hours later, Andrew woke up, disoriented and numb. His body ached and his mind was foggy. When he looked back up at the rope, he saw Attila still hanging motionless in the waterfall. The realization hit him like a punch to the chest. Attila was gone. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more gripping tales from the underwater world. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do in a situation like this? Until next time, stay safe, explore wisely, and always respect the depths.